through 3 hours. We've had 3 hours of insightful content for you, and we now have the fourth hour where we'll be looking for the future. So thanks. You are the survivors. You are the people who care the most about people matters in trusts and schools. So it is lovely to see such a rich group still here. And for those of us watching this in recording, lovely to see you there as well. So what have we spoken about today? So we had the first session where we looked at staff retention, how that is an increasing challenge. There's been a bounce back. There's an increase in risk of resigning across trusts. There's been an increase in the post-COVID period in some roles more than others, but we've seen an overall increase in risk of resigning. We then spoke about equality, diversity, and inclusion, and how that is a major topic for many trusts right now, and that even though overall staff members evaluate diversity, inclusion, and equality in a positive light, there are concerns where people with a protected characteristic will frequently spot things where the policies are lacking or the systems are lacking that those without a protected characteristic or those in leadership position might not see. And just now we spoke about culture, the importance of culture in organization. We spoke about how we can split that into values, behaviors, and structures, and applying that across the organization. And now it's about bringing that together and thinking about what are the main challenges for people leaders, for HR professionals in trusts this year and heading into the next year. And we're going to have two parts to this session. The first, we have an amazing guest and a friend of Edurio, Mandy Coulter, joining us for a conversation in the first half hour. And then we'll have a number of Edurio colleagues sharing some bits that we've been working on this year that are relevant for the trusts and schools that we either work with or that we are in the community with for the next year. So we'll kick off with conversation with Mandy, who doesn't need really an introduction, but she is the founder of Talent Architects. It's not an understatement to say she's one of the leading thinkers and doers on people strategy and people management in England in schools. She has past experience in local authority and NHS environments. She was the director of people for United Learning and is now an author and an advisor. Hello, Mandy, lovely to see you.
Oh, thanks for that lovely intro, Ernest. That's really kind. Thank you. And it's wonderful to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. So we've had a long day of discussion, and what I wanted to ask you, you work with the trusts, with a number of trusts as advisor, but you're also a trustee. What has changed for you this year? And for trust HR leaders, for people leaders in trusts, what do you see as their main challenges and main focus areas in the year ahead?
Obviously, great question. And I'm sure you've talked a lot about this morning. I mean, I think, we have seen that real sea change this year, haven't we, with acute recruitment challenges in the sector across the board. So, pre-pandemic, lots of us were worried about secondary teachers, but now it's kind of spread everywhere. Support staff are difficult to recruit, leaders are difficult to recruit, and even primary faces some challenges. And we all know what the national picture looks like with ITT recruitment, missing targets. So that's obviously been bubbling for a long time. We had that reprieve during the pandemic when lots of people trained to teach, but I think that's really exploded for most of the trusts I work with this year. And alongside that, you were talking about retention and that risk of resignation increasing. And I think it's possibly, a story of two halves, really, because I think the schools that are really, really focused hard on creating great cultures, great schools, great places to work are reaping the benefits of that. And schools at the same time are really struggling to retain staff. And in the work I do, there tends to be three big things come up. Leadership and all the stuff you've talked about on leadership dynamics is always an issue. But the two other areas that have really, I think, become more acute this year our behaviour in schools is a massive issue. And obviously, you know, it's quite topical between educationalists about what's the right approach to behaviour. I'm not an expert on that, but I definitely know it's impacting staff and their experience at work hugely. And obviously workload, which has been an issue in the sector for years, as we know. But again, I think in recent times, for all sorts of reasons, has become more acute again. So, you know, that need for a real focus in that area, more important than ever. So I think those are some of the things I'm seeing, Ernest, in my work of and none of them are totally new, but I think they've all come together in a crunch point, really, and it's creating quite a perfect storm in the sector at the moment.
Yeah, and there's a sense that what we see quite a lot when we talk to trust leaders, whether they're in HR roles or trust CEOs, is that there's a sense of funding is not where it needs to be. I think that needs to be acknowledged. And Sam Friedman shared a chart where, compared to other OECD countries, the real resource availability has just dropped compared to other countries. And at the same time, that is not a tool that trusts and schools have at their disposal. So how do you see trusts motivating themselves to keep pushing, to keep finding new ideas, finding solutions when there is a backdrop of a sense of unfairness and insufficient resource?
Oh, it's really tough, isn't it? And it's when, you know, leadership becomes more important than ever. I know you've talked about before that the risk of resignation at leadership level has increased, and that's a massive concern, because given the impact we know leadership dynamics has on the school culture, that churn of leaders potentially could really be very destabilizing. Through a difficult period, you need strong, great leaders who are going to help staff through the storm. I think that's the first thing. And for a lot of trusts, I always say, look, you know, really make sure you're looking after your leaders, big time, big priority. Trust boards, chief execs, top teams, you know, are you having conversations, stay conversations with your head teachers? What would retain them? Can they have a bit of flex? How are you looking after their well-being? Massively important, because you need that stability to see staff through the storm. I think that's number one. I think the other thing is, you know, it is true we've got massive challenges with funding, and we all want things to be better on that front. If you look at other sectors who've had challenges with funding over the years, and of course, you know, there are other sectors that were massively impacted in the last recession, far more than our sector was. I think the one positive of that is it does force you to be creative and innovative and look at the small things you can do that don't cost a lot of money. And I think we've got to kind of get into that mind zone of, you know, what is possible within that limited resource framework, you know. And again, I think there are lots of things that are possible and actually might help save money as well. So, you know, in the work that I do with schools on wellbeing and workload, and, you know, there's loads of things that are possible for schools to do to address teacher workload, and they make everybody more efficient, which is great because people are more focused then on learning and the children, but also they can impact recruitment and retention. That's money staying in school, not going on advertising or retraining people. So I think sometimes we fail to look at the bigger picture on cost and funding. Recruitment and retention is hugely expensive if you get it wrong. Poor staff engagement costs an absolute fortune in terms of absence, and yet sometimes we're only looking at the immediate budget in front of us and not those wider costs. So I think as people professionals, it's our responsibility to bring that broader thinking to the table. Look for the creative solutions that are not expensive. We've got to work really, really hard at that, and maybe talk to people in other sectors who've been through this journey and how did they manage it? What did they do? How did they innovate when times were tough? I think important, and absolutely look after our leaders and keep them well to support staff through the challenges. Buck that trend on risk of resignation at leadership level, I think, would be a big priority.
Yeah, I was recently at a conference in a panel discussion about staff well-being, and one of the questions was, well, are the HR teams themselves getting extremely demotivated, worn down by dealing with, basically being the people who deal with the issues when they arise? And one of the things we spoke about is when you take better care of your leaders, when you focus on the school leaderships, you can cascade some of the responsibility to deal with the challenges. So there's a question on what is it that you need to do at a trust level versus at a school level, and how do you build this caring for all staff is shared between the central team and the school team. But talking about the role of the central team, when we did the CEO survey with the Confederation of School Trusts last year, so basically over 300 trust CEOs took part, a large share of them said that they will be working on people strategy in the next year. So many said, we don't have one yet, but we will be launching more of that in the future. And Mandy, as you work with a lot of trusts on their people strategies, is there more activity around this space? Is there more thinking? Is our thinking getting more advanced around people strategies and trusts? What can you share with the developments there?
Oh, absolutely, actually. And this is, something I find personally very rewarding, because I think when I first set up Talent Architects in 2019, I'd ask that question in a room, have you got a people strategy? And I'd be lucky if one hand went up. And we talk about, well, why not? And, the fact that we don't leave the children to chance. We have strategies for school improvement. We don't leave the money to chance. We have strategies for finance. Why not people? Nowadays, a lot more hands go up to that question, almost half the room, or at least people are in progress. I think that the challenge now is, how do you create that strategy? Because if it's an HR professional sitting in a room writing it, that's the wrong place to be. That's not a people strategy. That's an HR plan. And they're two very different things. A people strategy is something that's meaningful to everybody in the trust, is led from the top, and has a very engaging process. Where's the staff voice? And that's obviously where your tools are absolutely brilliant. And when I walk into a trust, that's the first thing we do, is get that staff voice. What's it actually like to work in your schools at the moment? What's it actually like to work in your trust? Because you can't develop a strategy if you have no idea where you're starting from. So I think the challenge at the moment now in the sector is to make sure we're approaching this in the right way, in an engaging way, rather than a bit of an HR tick box. But definitely there's a shift. The other thing I'm seeing as well is lots and lots of trusts now wanting to recruit executive directors of people, which is absolutely fantastic. And I find myself incredibly busy recruiting and developing people professionals, far more than I thought I would be. But I find that incredibly exciting, because, if we can develop across the sector, and I'm sure there's lots of people here in those roles, people who can really be that strong voice at the top table for taking forward the strategy, for really making sure people matter. And we've got to use that opportunity in the HR profession, I think, because it's a fantastic opportunity that lots of trusts are seeing the benefit of this. And we've kind of got to step up, be creative, be innovative, make the case for investment, show and demonstrate the value that it brings. So I think that's been a real sea change in the last few months. So I hope those trends continue. And obviously that's happening at a time, like you say, when funding is challenging. So I think there's a lot of CEOs really seeing the value on being people-centered and having an expert working with them on that. And that's brilliant to see. We've got to demonstrate the value of that now, so that they keep that faith and we keep that going in the future as possibly money gets even tighter.
Yeah, if you have a trust of hundreds or even thousands of staff members and you lose a couple fewer, then that saves a lot of resource that you can invest in strengthening the HR team. And I know many of the trusts and schools here will be thinking about strengthening their HR capacity. Where do you see these professionals come from? Are they typically from the school or trust, from a different role, or from a different industry, which is, I know how you entered the education space. So what kind of backgrounds do you see for the people joining these HR roles?
Well, it's quite a mix. I mean, I think, as the sector matures, there's actually a lot of talent now in the sector with experience of the sector, and that's great. Obviously, that was very different 10 years ago when we were quite an immature sector, and HR as a function was very immature in the sector. So, lots of people here today, I'm sure, who are making a really big difference in their trusts, and that's, I think, changed quite a lot. What I'm also seeing is that we are becoming attractive to people outside of sector. I think people are starting to understand what Academy Trusts do, which frankly they didn't, or what they heard was quite negative in the past. Certainly in the recruitment I've done recently, people are very attracted to the purpose of what we do in our sector, and the values and the culture that trusts bring, and those trusts that are really putting that front and centre of their recruitment. It's attracting people. There's a lot of people coming from bigger organisations who like the fact that although, you know, it might feel to us quite big that a trust has got 1,000 staff, to them that's actually quite small, and you can wrap your arms around it and feel like you're really making a difference if you've come from, you know, the NHS or the Ministry of Justice or a big civil service department or whatever. I'm seeing a lot of that. People love that idea of really making a difference and being able to support people. And then you do get a third way, which is people with an education background taking on the people brief, and often obviously those that have come through maybe leading on teacher CPD, leadership CPD, and so I've got a real passion for people, for talent development, for succession planning, and bringing that to the table, and maybe combining that with a really good deputy who's got an HR background, who can make sure they cover that broader HR piece. So that's a model you don't see it as often, but you still see and can work really, really well. So I think, you know, for trusts, being open-minded about those three routes now as talent pipelines, I think is really important, actually really helpful to get the field you want.
It's fascinating seeing the roles that are less industry reliant. We also see that with administrative roles or staff, support staff in schools, where there was a big hike in risk of resigning when we saw that perhaps not all schools were able to offer the same flexible working conditions as other industries were able to, etc. But now in the last year, we've heard from some trusts that some of these roles in data or people roles, etc., are again a little bit easier to come by because some of the larger tech companies are reducing their activity. So there's this kind of weird situation of almost hoping for a little crisis elsewhere, so we can get our hands on some of these professionals. Mandy, we spoke in the first session about risk of resigning between different roles, but I mean, what is your experience with teaching versus non-teaching, and do you see those divergences?
Yeah, I mean, I think the risk of resigning feels like it's everywhere, doesn't it? You know, I feel really blessed because in the work I do, I get to speak to literally hundreds of school staff throughout a year, and I hear a lot of common themes. And you know, the drivers for it are quite different. You know, with teachers, it's often workload and behaviour, and certainly that's true actually of some support staff working in teaching, learning, pastoral areas too. But then you do also get that cost of living issue coming up for support staff a lot. You know, and I literally spoke, I was in a session the other week, and literally, you know, there's a young man saying, I want to buy a home. And there's no way I'm ever going to be able to afford a mortgage working in a school. And that was so sad to hear. And that's difficult because we can't always wave magic wands and resolve that. Although it was interesting talking further in that session, actually what people recognise is they can't just suddenly get a big pay rise. But, you know, there seemed to be no progression route for them that was clear and transparent. There seemed to be no sense of, well, if I get these qualifications, it'll lead to this ultimately. And of course, teachers do generally have that in place, not perfectly, but it's far more advanced for teachers than, you know, both in terms of your development and your pay progression. And that's what I think a lot of support staff are looking for, as well as, you know, they love the idea of just please make my money go further with all the, you know, benefits packages you can give nowadays that, you know, will just help that pound in my pay packet go that bit further. So I think this is what I mean about listening to staff voice, really getting underneath the skin of things, and being creative in what we do. We can't necessarily wave that magic wand and resolve things right now, but we can definitely put in place things and let staff know what we're doing to do that. And I think as well, when it comes to some of the support roles and things like flexible working, you occasionally go into a trust or a school and it's kind of the lowest common denominator. You know, it's, well, the teachers can't work from home, therefore nobody will, you know, which is just ridiculous because the jobs are different. And, you know, no job is the same. No two, even two teaching jobs, you know, what you can let a maths teacher do is different to another subject. You know, so I always encourage people to think, you know, it's about making sure that there's a process for conversation with everybody about what's right for them in their role, and it will be different, and be open about that. Where it gets an issue is if all the central team get tons of flexibility and there's nothing happening in the schools on that, that is going to cause tension. You know, your school staff will get annoyed. Whereas if the whole trust is looking hard at how can we create flexible working that's contextual for the role you do in our trust, then that's a very different story and message, I think, that you can sell across the board.
Thank you. And I realize I'm firing a lot of questions at Mandy. She's such a treasure trove, information, ideas, and thoughts that I've got a whole bunch more. If anyone would like to add any comments from your trust or school's perspective, or any questions in the next 10 minutes, we can pick up some of those. But Mandy, another topic that I wanted to pick your brain on is equality, diversity, inclusion. And it's been 3 years now since the murder of George Floyd, and 3 years ago this came up as a major topic suddenly on the agenda. In 2021 we reacted with designing a survey for that, gather insights, and have been publishing some research around that. Do you see trusts continue their investment in that, continue their effort? Is there a difference between an initial tokenistic approach to that and a fully strategic approach? I know you do a lot of work on this. So what are some of the trends that you see on how trusts approach equality, diversity, and inclusion?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's fundamental to creating great places to work, this. And of course, it goes beyond the people agenda as well, because it's about pupils, it's about communities, it's about suppliers, it's about a whole range of stakeholders as well. You'll know that I co-founded a sister venture, Trust Inclusion, with some partners because I was finding this was a real gap for a lot of trusts. And we published a paper earlier this year, which was all about how to do the work in a deep and meaningful way on EDI. And the reason we published that is because we were going into a lot of trusts where HR were given this agenda, and it was very focused on, let's get more diverse. You know, we're not ethnically diverse enough, or we've got a gender pay gap, or whatever it might be. And it was very initiative led and kind of left to HR. And sometimes HR are left then grappling with some quite difficult issues. You know, should we do blind recruitment, for example, which needs quite a lot of conversation and ownership and buy-in to do well if you're going to do that. And there are reasons not to do it, to be honest, as well as reasons to do it. The trusts that we started to work with were the ones that recognise this needs to be led from the whole exec team and board, not just given to HR, because it goes beyond people. But actually, you know, even if it was just people, it needs top leadership to create the right sense of what we're trying to achieve here. And also the trust that we work with recognise that focusing on diversity alone isn't the end game here, because you can retract more diverse people, but you won't keep them unless they feel safe, valued, respected, and that they belong. And that's where inclusion comes in. You know, equality, diversity, and inclusion is not a thing. It's actually three different things. They are different things. Equality, that kind of, you know, legislative framework is just what people expect nowadays. It's, you know, an expectation of a right. Diversity is just difference. It's just difference. And I know we talk about the protected characteristics, but there's lots of difference that isn't enshrined in law, and we are all different. It's just difference. And everybody should feel their difference is valued, whether they're covered by the protected characteristics or not. Inclusion is an emotion, it's a feeling, it's culture. And the trust that we know that are really working hard on this are focusing on how do we make sure we're incredibly inclusive in our trust, so that as we're going out to try and attract more diversity, they'll stay. But also it's like a cycle that feeds itself, isn't it? You know, because your staff will talk about that inclusion. And, you know, I always think it's quite ironic because we've got a massive inclusion issue facing us with support staff often saying we don't feel valued, recognised, respected, we don't get what the teachers get. You know, that's an EDI issue. And we need to make sure that we're tackling those issues that they're raising, so that when we do bring in greater diverse people, they feel like that diversity adds value. It brings something rich to the table, as opposed to people coming into our trust and not feeling welcomed. And I think as HR professionals, we need to be having that conversation at the top table to make sure that we're doing these things in a very serious, and intentful and long-term way, rather than rushing off and doing a few initiatives, which is tempting because there'll be pressure on us to do that. But actually, I think we need to resist that. You know, it's fine to do positive action and it's fine to go out there and do some recruitment initiatives, but only if you're putting the effort in to create an environment where people will thrive when they come, and you'll really get the value from them.
Yeah, it feels like in an ideal world, we shouldn't be thinking about that at all because it shouldn't matter. We should naturally be a place where everybody is respected and valued. We are not in that place yet as a society. So the worst thing is doing a little bit on it where it actually detriments, but actually thinking about it from the fundamental elements is really powerful and important. So thank you for that, for sharing that. And the other quick topic that I've observed, and I'm sure many trusts here are thinking about, is there are more and more frameworks showing up across the system. So there is the Department for Education published their high quality trust criteria, which says staff and people matters really matter. They're one of the 5 pillars. The Confederation of School Trusts published the Strong Trust Framework, which again talks about resilient staff. There is the Math Summary Inspections, which tackle some bits of it. Now, do you see the development of these frameworks? Is that helpful for the community? Does that change how trusts see the importance of people, the importance of staff, or is that just another layer of bureaucracy? What's your take on those developments across the different frameworks?
I think it can be helpful because if we think back historically, you know, we've kind of prioritized the things that we know we're held to account for, that we're told are important. Hence why, you know, I mean, it's obvious to hold educational outcomes up there as a priority, but similarly with money. And I think, you know, that hasn't happened with people because nobody's ever asked, nobody's ever guided, you know, there's been no sense of, you know, expectation, I suppose, that this is an agenda. So I don't think it's unhelpful. And I think those frameworks can help guide people who are starting out on the journey. But I don't think it necessarily, you know, is going to be the thing that drives the change. I think the thing that drives the change is chief execs and top teams recognizing that being people-centered as a trust is what delivers for children. You know, having that real sense of, you know, I'm putting my staff first because my staff will look after the children and it's my job to look after my people. It's that mentality, which is, you know, heartfelt, it's culture, that will really make a difference in our sector as opposed to, you know, a framework from somewhere else. But if some of the frameworks help guide people in that and get them thinking a bit differently, then I think that's great. But we've all worked, I'm sure, in organizations where you have a strategy, but there's no heart behind it in the leadership. We've all been there, and it kind of only gets you so far, to be honest. So just being told this is a good thing to do isn't necessarily going to cut the grade. I think leaders who have a very people-centered view of the world are the ones that are going to make the biggest difference in this area.
Thank you. And clearly a lot of them on this call. So it's wonderful to have this group. Just 2 quick questions then to wrap up this bit. One is, we've spoken about what's next for the sector. And I know I always follow what's next for you, what you're working on, because that is in many ways mirrors what's important for the sector. So can you just share a little bit about your priorities for the next year, where you will be focusing your work in 2023-24?
Yeah, thanks, Ernest. That's really a helpful question because it really makes me focus. What's my plan for next year? I think obviously doing more work in the EDI space. It's been fabulous working with some trusts on that over the last 2 or 3 years and seeing more and more really being serious about that. So I'm very optimistic that will continue to develop. I think continuing to recruit HR talent and develop HR talent, that's a big part of my mission. I do eventually want to be able to retire and go off and, you know, and leave the sector with a brilliant wealth of talent. So this is why I love sessions like this, to see all these people here. It's fantastic. So that's something I really want to keep doing more of. Keep helping HR trusts to innovate in people strategy, think outside the box and be creative, because we need that thinking more than ever, in a crisis. So really want to do more of that. And then the other area that I'm really focused on at the moment is thinking about how we can support middle leaders better in our sector. I don't think the national frameworks focus on those basic people leadership skills. And I meet so many middle leaders that have had no training, no development, no coaching, no mentoring on how to lead people, and are really in at the sharp end on this. And it's almost like the worst kept secret in the sector, because as HR professionals, we absolutely know this, and then we get all the work that comes from it in casework. So I am doing some thinking at the moment over the summer about what can we do, what might we develop that absolutely supports the sector better, with equipping middle leaders with some basic support and skills, and putting that at the heart of our people strategy. And then also at the end of all that, and as you know, I'm really passionate about kind of trying to digitalize what I do and spread some of my, time and effort and make it really accessible to schools. I don't know how I'm going to do that yet, but it's still part of my mission to try and do that. And I just want to reach as many schools as possible, but there's only one of me. So I need to think about my strategy for doing that over the next 12 months.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. And I'll finish with a question that I was asked, and I realized I'm not very well equipped to answer, but you are. So I was at a conference, and this was an HR event, and somebody asked, we're speaking a lot about how we support our leaders, how we support our staff members. How do we, as HR professionals, as people leaders, support ourselves and our teams? Because HR teams, people teams, are frequently the ones most vulnerable for dealing with challenging situations, painful situations, difficult conversations, etc. Now, you've led people team at United Learning, and you work with many teams now. So how can the people on this call and their teams support themselves and their well-being throughout this unquestionably difficult time?
Yeah, I think there was some work done by the CIPD on this recently that showed, again, the churn in HR as a profession is a real challenge at the moment, because there's a bit of burnout. Been so busy looking after people through the pandemic. I see a big difference, by the way, in trusts that have invested in a decent employee assistance program and those that haven't. Because those that have access to counselling support have somewhere to channel staff to go to that isn't HR. And those that haven't invested in that find it's all coming to HR. So get that in place, because that isn't actually our job to do that. There are professionals that can do it low cost, and takes the brunt off HR. So I think that's a really important thing to do. I think all the things that we tell leaders to do, we need to do in our own teams. And we are terrible at this in HR. We're so busy looking after everybody else. We don't always do it. And I have been just as guilty of that as an HR leader. So really just putting that effort in. Do we check in with our people? Do we ask how they are when we have one-to-ones? Do we look at their workload? Supervision, particularly if you've got staff doing an awful lot of casework. Is there effective supervision in place? And some people are dealing with some really tough stuff, aren't they, out there at the moment? So particularly if they're dealing with safeguarding cases and all of that. So maybe looking at supervision and peer support for teams. One of the great things from the development programs I run is to see that lovely network of people come together, and they go away and they keep in touch and they support each other. And I think find your tribe. Particularly as an HR leader, it can be quite lonely, especially if you're having to be quite challenging in your organisation. So find that tribe, find the people you can pick up the phone to, chat things through, who get it and understand it. Have a coach, have a mentor, have those things around you. We all know this stuff because we're telling others all the time to do it, and maybe applying some of our advice to ourselves, I think, will be an important place to start.
Thank you so much, Wendy. And everybody, look around the room. There are people on this call who are part of this tribe, who are part of caring a lot about these issues. So if you see a name you recognize, drop them a message. If you want to talk to more people, drop a message in the chat. This is a wonderful community to be part of. Thank you so much, Mandy, for joining us. It's been really, really powerful insights in a very quick fire round. So thank you, Mandy, for that. And we'll move on to just some updates from the Edurio team. Some of these are available for everybody to use. Some of them are more relevant for the Edurio customers. So we'll go through a couple of very quick updates that we wanted to share with the community. So there we go. And there are three updates that we're going to share. And first, I'm going to ask Imanta, who is our Insights Manager, to share about a new hub, a new resource available to anyone working on stakeholder feedback. Imanta.
Hi, everyone. Good to be here today. Thanks, Ernest and Mandy, for wrapping up this day with a look at what's in store for the sector. And I think that maybe at this point in the day, there might be some mixed emotions in the audience with the people listening. That wave of emotion, of enthusiasm and motivation to get to work based on all the learnings that you've gained here today, maybe mixed with some doubt and feeling hesitant about how to get started. So I'm here to share with you our newest resource from Edurio, which will help you make the most out of stakeholder feedback surveys. So anyone who is interested in using stakeholder feedback surveys as the tool to get the people voice, this is for you. The resource is available online, free for anyone. So even if you are not currently an Edurio customer, you are free to explore and to use this resource for your needs. Anyone looking to do purposeful stakeholder feedback surveys, to bring focused data analysis and taking action into your school improvement plans, you'll have access to sections that are very rich with content and materials and templates, which are absolutely free to download and to adapt for your organization. All that we ask is that you do fill out a little form to get access to the materials. It's very simple, and then you'll have all the materials at your disposal to use. And what we do in this resource is we take you through the main steps of the stakeholder feedback cycle. So if you're new to this process and you're kind of just feeling your way through what it is to do a purposeful stakeholder feedback survey, we do suggest that you go through and follow the steps in order. But if you're here kind of looking for specific answers, do feel free to jump around and find the things that you're looking for. We start with setting your goals. And as with any big project that you take on, you should have a clear reason why it is you're looking for this stakeholder feedback. What is the voice that you're looking for, and why are we choosing this moment in time to dedicate our resources, our time, our efforts to look into this topic? And then along with that, we have to understand what it is we're looking for, what are the topics we're looking to explore, and who are the key stakeholders that we want to impact. Who are we doing this change for? Then the next step, we cover carrying out the survey. What are the things you have to take into account when you want to carry out the survey? And this has 3 phases from the planning. So how to form a strong team that is aligned and focused on the goal to keep the momentum going, to get this process going through. What are some of the logistics you have to take into account, and also the time. When should you, run the survey? What are the best times in the school year for feedback surveys? In the design section of carrying out the survey, we give you all of our Edurio best tips and tricks on how to write a very high quality survey. So please do check out that section for what we take into account when we write our own surveys. And in the running phase, when it comes to actually running the survey, we give you all kinds of tips on what to take into account to get the highest response rate possible. What can you do to get people to come to your survey, to give you the answers that you're looking for, so that you have credible and usable data to perform quality analysis on. That takes us to the next step, which is analyzing your results. The fun moment of truth, when you get to see what your stakeholders have said and what is the information that they're giving you. And at this point, we're asking you to kind of look at first broadly at the information. What is the big picture of the results? And then slowly we're adding your context. What is the context of your organization? What other information do you have available to fill in the gaps, to be able to make well-drawn conclusions that are connected to your goal that you set in the beginning, that you have an opportunity to go with like a focused momentum into taking action. The next step is the taking action phase, which is also where, many times we kind of feel that drop of momentum. We may feel that, okay, we've asked our stakeholders how they felt, our job is done, but we don't feel that that is the truth. We truly believe that once you have that information, once you have that voice, you have to implement it into your strategies, be purposeful with what you're going to do with it so that you can really see long-lasting change in your organization. And then finally, we invite you to review and continue. So after any big project that you do, you should review how it went, what went well, what you could do better next time, and how are you going to continue? How are you going to continue using stakeholder feedback in your strategy planning? How will you be measuring impact? How will you be following along, checking in that these priorities are still your priorities and what you can do to make sure that you're still on track? And taking all of that into account, I want to emphasize once again that the collection and feedback of the data itself does not lead to lasting organizational change. So it's about the people working with the data who will bring it to action. And today we've been talking about the people in your organizations and how can you support them to use the information, to use their voice in how you plan and look forward and move your organization forward. But of course, life is messy. The process is not as linear as it looks in the cycle. But I think with following the steps that we've outlined and going through the materials and making sure that it's adapted to your situation, we can all make really great progress. All of this is available online for free. As I said, here you can access the hub, go.edurio.com/feedback. I think we'll also add the link in the chat. We'll emphasize that this is a work in progress, so we will continuously be updating and adding new materials. So make sure that you do fill out the form to have access to the materials and receive updates about the new things that we're working on. And as always, we'd love to hear your feedback. So what do you find in the hub that is useful, and what else you would find useful that we can add to our to-do list in the future. So thank you very much, and I'll hand it back to you, Ernest.
Thank you, Imanta. And it's been really proud moment for us to launch this, because we initially started thinking about this for our customers, the trusts and schools we work with. But then we realized that we've developed this piece. Why not make it available for everybody? Because obviously not everybody is at a stage where they either need or have the resource for external partners and stakeholder feedback. So we believe truly that feedback can be tremendously powerful for an organization if it is done with the right strategic, purposeful approach. And so we believe that this piece will help everybody do that. So thank you, Imanta, for leading the work on this and sharing that resource. We move on. As you know, Edurio works on stakeholder feedback surveys, and we have a range of tools for thinking about staff wellbeing and staff experience. I'm going to ask Beatrice, who leads our work on survey development, to just share the developments that we have, and this is most relevant for the trusts that we work with, or the ones that are looking forward to some of our research reports next year. So Beatrice, what's up with Edurio surveys this year?
Hi, everybody. Thanks very much, Ernest. Yeah, I am very excited to share with you the upcoming updates to our staff surveys, specifically coming during the school year of 2023 and 2024. And as mentioned earlier, as we have approached the 5th anniversary of our staff experience survey and the 3rd anniversary of our staff equality, diversity, and inclusion survey, we obviously recognize the significant changes and challenges that the sector has faced in the recent years. And here at Adurio, we are committed to ensuring our surveys capture the most relevant insights to understand and support stakeholders within the sector. And in addition to considering what the survey data tells us, we constantly listen to our customer and sector feedback in order to be able to enhance our surveys. So in the upcoming September release, our staff equality, diversity and inclusion survey will feature an increased focus on equity in the workplace. We have included some new questions in both the main section as well as the demographic segment of the survey. These questions address important topics such as reasonable adjustments and accessibility in the workplace, mental health and social mobility. And by delving deeper into these areas, we aim to provide a more comprehensive understanding of equity within staff experiences, while also ensuring the continuity and integrity of our benchmarks, and to be able to provide our customers with that comparative analysis. So additionally, our staff experience and well-being survey will also undergo some key updates. Firstly, we are introducing demographic questions related to protected characteristics within the survey. Protected characteristics like age, gender, ethnicity, disability, among others. And this will enable us to analyze how the overall experience varies for individuals from diverse backgrounds. Secondly, we are introducing a new module called Organizational Culture. And this section aims to explore the values that Jan spoke about earlier in the previous section that staff members exhibit in the workplace, as well as the values that they would like to see emphasized both within the organization as well as when interacting with students and parents. So the organizational culture module aims to serve as a valuable tool for trust in schools to assess the similarities and the differences in their respective cultures, and is a crucial initial step in putting culture at the heart of your strategies. Thirdly, we have also added a question on reasons for leaving the workplace to get more detailed insight into staff retention and recruitment challenges that are unfortunately faced by many at this time. So that's our dedication to continuously improve our surveys, continue providing valuable insights for the education sector. And we believe that these updates will enhance the understanding of staff experiences, equity, and organizational culture, and enable Schools and Trusts to make informed decisions. So if you have any questions or interest, make sure to reach out to us, and we can then give you more in-depth information on our surveys as well as the upcoming updates in September. So yeah, thanks very much. That's in short what's to come next for Adurio Surveys. Ernest, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Beatrice, for sharing that. And thanks to the community on this call and others. All of this is based on feedback that we've received, ideas that we've received, topics that you are interested in finding out about. So whenever you feel, ooh, this is really important for us, please talk to us and share what is important for you, and we'll make sure we react to that. So thanks everybody for the work, and Beatrice for leading the implementation of that. Now, last but not least, I'd like to ask Molly to share some of the future for Adurio community. Molly heads up the customer success team at Adurio. She works directly with our customers in how we serve, how we implement their stakeholder feedback processes. And we've been working on a couple of exciting initiatives there. Molly, over to you.
Thanks, Ernest, and hi everyone, and thanks for everyone who is sticking around, and I hope you've enjoyed the day. So yeah, as Ernest said, we're always constantly trying to evolve with our customers and looking at opportunities of where we can help make the most impact, particularly in that stakeholder feedback space. So I'm just going to take the final few moments to talk you through two specific initiatives that we're going to be working on over the coming months, and that you'll start to see in the autumn term after the summer holidays. So speaking to customers of Adurio and speaking to people in the community, one of the key challenges that people find with stakeholder feedback is actioning the results afterwards, using the data to make that meaningful progress. So that's one challenge. What we also have in our community is lots of people that are doing that very well. So what we've done is I identified an opportunity to bring all those people together in order to create some support groups. Ernest, if you just want to, thank you. So the notion here is that the more people you have, and Mandy mentioned this earlier, a kind of a tribe approach, what we're hoping to do at Ajurio is facilitate those groups to be able to take the outputs and take those learnings from each other. The next thing we are embarking on, Ernest, if you could, thank you, is following on from Imanta's session. We are going to be moving towards creating specific resource hubs. So survey-specific, subject-specific resource hubs that will allow you guys to access resources that are relevant for the surveys that you're taking. These are the two, they are very much in early stages at the moment, but as I said, we're hoping to be able to have these for you in the autumn term and continue that progress with the stakeholder feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly, for sharing that. And I will stop sharing now. Thanks, everybody, for a wonderful day. Thanks to those who lasted throughout all the 4 sessions that we've had today. We continuously try to improve what we do, create new research outputs, create new ideas to work with the trusts that we collaborate and the wider community. So a massive thanks to everybody working in people and HR roles in trusts. We will share a request for feedback on today, and we would also love you to share topics that you'd love to explore deeper. This is our big event for the year, but we will have multiple sessions throughout the next year. So we're planning quite an active calendar of events. So please do share what you'd like to talk about. If you'd like to volunteer leading a session or participating in one, if you have speakers that you think the rest of the community would benefit from, all of that you'll be able to add to the feedback form that we'll share with you, but also you have our email addresses. Please do reach out at any point and share some of those elements. And finally, let me just say thanks to Iona, Jurgis, Danny, and the rest of the folks from the Ajurio team of putting this event together. I've really enjoyed listening to all the sessions, all the contributions from the people in the chat and adding their perspectives, all our guest speakers. It's been a wonderful day. Hope you have a lovely end of the school year and then get some good rest over the summer and come back energized for 2023-24. And with that, we are closing the day. Thanks, everybody.